Can you believe it? It's already been 8 weeks since I started this new nail fundamentals playlist here on the Nail Hub YouTube channel. I've got 13, because it's my lucky number, 13 questions that I've chosen out of the last 8 weeks of videos to answer for you right here. Hey guys, Liz from the Nail Hub here, and I am going through the aftermath of a really bad cold. I actually just went to Russia on vacation. Russia is amazing, by the way. I highly recommend it. But I came home with a cold. So I'm not sick anymore, thank you, but I do have a horrible voice and I do need to cough sometimes. So I'm gonna try and edit all of that grossness out for you. But just in case you're wondering why I sound so 900 phone number, that's why. I'm getting over a cold. So we have already been doing this new Nail Fundamentals playlist for 8 weeks now, which is crazy. Actually 4 days more than 8 weeks. And I have gotten so many amazing questions from all of you. A lot of you guys have been bringing up really great ideas for future videos, questions of stuff that you guys are struggling with, and also some stuff that maybe it wasn't clear in a previous video. So I wanted to take an opportunity to go through all of those questions. I got so many, I had to boil this down to 13, and I was gonna do 10, and then I was like, oh, there's so many, I need to add more. So I picked 13 because it's my lucky number. Okay, so without further ado, let's start with the first question. Hi. Is it better to use the alcohol acetone solution or the cleanser that's recommended with whatever brand I'm using? All right, so in one of my videos before, and you'll see me talk about this a lot, I talk about the fact that a lot of branded nail cleansers have scent and they have color. And I've had some really amazing conversations with people in the nail industry, and I've also experienced this myself, that if a cleanser has color or it has a smell, it means that it's got some kind of residue in it, and that residue can actually be left on the nail plate. The residue can do two major things. It can actually create a residue on the nail plate and prevent proper adhesion of your products like base coat, etc. And it can also make whatever base coat you're gonna put on top of the nail not work that great. I have actually seen this very often with the brands that I use, and maybe I borrowed someone's cleanser at a nail class and I clean the nail and I go to put my base coat on and my base coat is like oil on water, or the nail pops off when my nails never pop off. So I really want you guys to understand that the reason why I recommend making your own nail cleanser is because it's much easier, it's much cheaper, and you know for a fact that there's no smell or color in it, which is going to prevent your products from working properly. So totally up to you guys. If you want to use the cleanser for your system, that's great. But one of the biggest things I've seen is that when nail techs want to use a different brand or they're, reaching for something to clean the nail, I often recommend just stick with plain and simple acetone and isopropyl alcohol or rubbing alcohol. And like I mentioned in one of my previous videos, I fill my bottle like almost all the way up with isopropyl alcohol, 90% or better, because you don't want very much water in it. And then I do put a little bit of plain acetone, not nail polish remover, but plain acetone in the bottle as well. And the acetone really helps to evaporate any of that water, get the nail nice and dry, and the alcohol helps to kill bacteria and make sure that the surface of my nail is completely clean before I cap it with product. Okay, so I hope that helps. Okay, next question. Where did you get your Funkos? What are all the characters in the background? Okay, so I am a big nerd. I don't know if you guys know this, but I love playing video games. I love anything to do with yarn or thread. Like I do a ton of cross stitch. I do a ton of embroidery. I crochet blankets like it's going out of style. I'm obsessed with that stuff. So in my nail room, I actually have a full area. My nail table is all nails. And then I've got a full area that is embroidery and yarn related crafts. And then I've also got my nerdy stuff in the background that I'm just obsessed with. I don't have that many video game things in here, but I do have all of my awards on all the walls in here, which is really fun. I'll show you guys that later. But in the background, I have just to show you guys everything, I have a David Bowie labyrinth, well, Yeah, it's Labyrinth candle because this is David Bowie from Labyrinth, and one of my friends got me this candle and I'm obsessed with it. It's like a prayer candle, Mexican style prayer candle or Catholic prayer candle, but it's got David Bowie on it. And I love you, David. I hope you're listening. Okay, I also have my podcast mic back here. I have some of my color swatches from my gels, and I've also got my Funko characters. So this half right here, these four guys and the little worm, are from Labyrinth. If you guys haven't seen Labyrinth, it is a really wacky Jim Henson movie that David Bowie was in, and I grew up with that movie and I'm just obsessed with it. I think I've watched it 500 million times. I know every single line in the movie. I know every single song, and I just love it. So if you guys want to check out Labyrinth, check it out. It's amazing. I also have Harry Potter guys back here. So I've got Snape and Hermione and, of course, Dobby. I mean, you can't have Funko without Dobby, right? Dobby. I also love Harry Potter. I'm obsessed with Harry Potter, among other things that I love. So I had to get the Harry Potter Funkos. And I think actually my favorite is Hagrid. I just love Hagrid. So those are my Funkos. I also have like a quick little frame that I did of all of my hand-painted characters. This is actually one of my favorite things to do is hand paint cartoons on nails. So I've got lots of different characters here. And I have posted them on my Instagram, so if you want to see pictures of them. I have two Instagram accounts. One of them is The Nail Hub, and the other one is Nerding Out Nails. Nerding Out Nails, I just randomly started. It has like no followers whatsoever, but I started it just so I could have a complete profile of all of my cartoon nails. Yeah, so that's what I have in the background, as well as some art and other things. But you can get the Funkos on Amazon. I'll put the link right here. I usually buy everything on Amazon. I'm a Prime person, so every day my UPS driver knows me better than some of my friends, and I get Prime packages every single day from Amazon. So I love you, Amazon. I love you, David Bowie, and I love you, Harry Potter. And that's a little bit about me and why I have stuff in the background of my nail studio. Okay, let's see here. Next question. If I add acrylic powder to the base coat, should I add another layer of base coat on top of that before applying the color gel? Okay, this is something that I've seen a lot of people ask me about randomly. I'm not sure if it comes from dip powder. I'm not sure if it comes from like weird things that are being taught to people. But I do find that people think if you sprinkle powder on top of wet gel, it makes it stronger. And I find this to be kind of weird because the base should be sufficient on its own. If you're looking for something stronger, I would recommend sticking with gel in the gel family. Acrylic requires monomer in order to polymerize and become essentially plastic, right? So when we put our acrylic powder with our monomer, it actually polymerizes and it kind of melts that powder. The monomer kind of melts that powder into one cohesive piece of material. If you're sprinkling acrylic powder into gel, the gel's not going to dissolve anything on the acrylic powder. So you're literally going to have like particles of acrylic, kind of sand-like, you know, in your gel. And I don't really see how that's going to do anything. It doesn't network together. It doesn't become one cohesive piece. It's just acrylic powder suspended in gel, and I don't see how that's going to create any additional strength. So if you want to add additional strength to your nail surfaces, you could add builder gel. There's soak off and hard gel builder gel, and I would say stick with something like that. We're going to address builder gel really soon. I'm going to start getting into artificial enhancements now that you guys have had a chance to really learn the basics, as well as some other basics as we go along. But I really don't recommend throwing dry stuff into your gel because it's going to make your gel brittle, it's going to make it separated, and it's not going to cure properly. And like I said, there's nothing in the gel to actually dissolve that acrylic powder and to blend it into the material. So it's just going to make everything really dry, and to me, I don't know why you would want that. It's also going to add texture too. So now you're not going to have a smooth surface, and like you mentioned, you're going to have to put another base coat on top of that acrylic gel mix because it's not going to be smooth, and you're going to have to put color over it, blah, blah, blah. So stay away from the mixing, sprinkling powder stuff. I don't understand it, and it doesn't make your nails any stronger. It just makes the mixture drier. Okay? Okay. Sorry, had to take a little break there to get this back on track. Okay, what do you think of gel polishes which don't require base coat, and why don't they need it? Okay, so what you're referring to are all-in-one gel polishes that have base color and top coat included in one formula. These are extremely popular, and you'll see them everywhere if you're shopping for gel polish on eBay or on AliExpress or Alibaba or Wish or any of those kind of websites that are driving Chinese products to other places. The 3-in-1s, I am not a huge fan of because I don't think they do anything that well. They don't need a base coat because it's built in, so you don't have to add any additional base coat. It's built into the system. But the thing that I find is it doesn't do anything that well. So it doesn't adhere that well. It doesn't give you that great of color or gel texture. A lot of them are very much like spray paint. Like they smell really, really bad. They smell like really hefty chemicals. And I find that they're really hard to take off, actually. Rather than thinking like, oh, this is going to be like so easy to take off because everything's all in one and I don't have all the layers, I find that they either completely peel off or chip off like spray paint, or they're near impossible to get off the nail even with acetone. So I don't like them. I actually did use them when I first started getting into nails because it was the only thing I could buy online. At least I didn't know where to buy stuff, period. Regardless, I didn't even know about the whole pro-only thing back when I started doing nails. But I had a hard time finding things that were accessible to me. And so I started buying stuff on eBay, on AliExpress, on Wish, on all these different random sites. And what I found was the quality was really bad. And a lot of these gels were like 3-in-1. And I was like, oh, this is amazing. I don't have to use base. I don't have to use top coat. I can just paint it on one thin coat. But what I found was they had crazy exothermic reactions. Like one of them almost burned my fingers off, even in an old school, traditional CFL lamp. I also found that they smell really bad. They don't last that well. And if they do last, they're extremely difficult to remove. And I've also had staining with some of them because there's no actual base layer, clear base layer protecting your natural nail. Some of the red and maroon colors actually stained my natural nail. So I'm not a fan. I know that they're very easy to get your hands on, and oftentimes they're like $3 or $4 a pop. But if it smells like spray paint, it probably is spray paint, and I just find that they don't do the job that well. So that's my personal 2 cents, and I hope that helps, but I prefer 3-step systems where there's base, color, and top coat because it allows me to use each product independently the way that it should be used, and it does give me actually more flexibility because if I want to use just base coat and top coat to create a clear nail, I can do that. I can always file down to my base coat if I want to leave that on. I find that it has better adhesion. It releases better from the nail plate when I do soak it off. And the color gels, I can use them for art. I can use them for full color. And they're meant to be color gel. And so they tend to be much more pigmented and much more high quality. So I prefer base, color, top coat, 3-step system rather than these shortcut products. Okay. Sometimes I get pits in my base coat after curing. Why does this happen? I actually refer to this as the Swiss cheese effect because if you've ever had this happen, it literally looks like your base coat is Swiss cheese. There's like random little holes in it and you can see your natural nail peeking through. Sometimes this happens with color gel. Sometimes it happens with top coat even. There's a couple main reasons why this happens. Reason number 1 is because you're applying your base or whatever product too thinly, and that product happens to shrink a lot. So if we think about brownies in the oven, right? Brownies are this big liquid that we've mixed everything together. We pour that nice liquid, chocolatey liquid into our pan and we bake it. Well, it shrinks, right? I mean, you have all of these loose molecules that are completely separate, and through the cooking process, everything comes together and starts to bond into an actual hard physical thing, which is the baked brownie. Very similar in nail products. When we actually harden the product from liquid to solid, a lot of times there's a contraction of the product or shrinkage, and so everything pulls back a little bit. That's why we cap the free edge so that when it shrinks, it doesn't pull away from the free edge and expose the free edge. If it's capped, it kind of shrink wraps on the nail, and so you get this kind of like effect where the gel can't shrink away from the free edge. But you might have noticed it where you painted perfectly around the cuticle area, and as soon as you cure it, everything seems like it's sucked in a lot, and now there's a big space or a bigger space than you had anticipated. That's from the gel shrinking. All gels shrink, it just depends on how much they shrink. So if you're applying your base or your color or your top coat too thinly, you will find that it shrinks and it actually creates little holes because it's trying to pull into a solid, and if there's not enough product, it'll actually create these little pits, this little Swiss cheese effect. A great way to fix that is use the slip layer technique or the wetting layer technique, whichever one you want to call it. I use that a lot, and that actually makes sure that I get that nice thin controlled layer on the nail first, and then I apply a little bit more product to make sure there's enough product. That way I get perfect curing without any shrinkage or pitting whatsoever. Okay, so first reason why that happens is because of too thin of coats. Number two reason that could cause this is oils or incompatible inhibition layer. So if you recall from my base coat video, we talked about how oil can inhibit gel from doing its thing, and also inhibition layers from an incompatible product mix. So like if you have one base coat brand and then you're putting another color on top, sometimes pitting will happen because the product that's on top, it's like on oil on water, right? So it's pooling, it's pitting, it won't actually create a nice smooth even layer. So the pitting can actually happen also from more of like a pooling effect, which pooling effect means it's kind of like oil on water, where everything starts to glob together and it doesn't like what it's sitting on top of. That can happen because there's oil on the nail. Oftentimes you'll see it pull at the free edge or you'll get pitting on the free edge because maybe you didn't clean all of the stuff off from underneath their nail. Maybe they had lotion on. And also maybe there's too much oil in their nail plate and you haven't gotten it completely off. That can also happen. But it can also happen from trying to put two incompatible products on top of each other, and there's still that inhibition layer or uncured product in between that's causing the two things to interact. So those are the two reasons why pitting happens. And if you want to fix the oil issue, cleanse the nails with acetone. Acetone is a great oil stripper. So you can just cleanse everything really well with acetone, strip all the oil off of the nail, make sure you get it off of the skin as well, and clean out those grooves. And if you're dealing with inhibition layer, you can dry wipe it with just a dry brush, or you can clean the nail and buff it, or just use the products that go together. I like to use base color and top coat that go together, especially when I'm just doing gel color like gel polish. When we get into builder gels, I'll show you more about mixing and matching because it's less of an issue. But when we're talking gel polish, I really recommend you guys get that nail plate prepped like I've shown in previous videos, get that base coat applied properly like I've shown in previous videos, and stick with the same base color and top coat. It's not expensive to buy the base that goes with the colors that you use, and I highly recommend it because it's going to save you a lot of headaches, okay? All right, next question is, let's see here, sorry, my list, I need to scroll down. How do you know if a base is sanding free base or just a regular traditional base coat? Good question. If you notice in my base coat video, I talked about regular base coat and I talked about sanding free, which sanding, I don't like that word. I wish it was like etching free or low buff or something, I don't know, because really you do have to remove the natural shine in order for it to work 110%. You can get away without doing it at all, especially if the nail has already had product on it. But anyway, long story short, it should say if it's sanding free somewhere. It might not say it on the actual jar itself, but when you buy it or when you see it advertised, a lot of companies will say sanding free, or they'll say something in the effect of you don't need to buff the nail that much, or you don't need to etch the nail plate, etc. But you can always ask the manufacturer, hey, do I need, what's your recommended prep for this product? Is it sanding free? Ask the manufacturer. That's a great way to figure it out. But normally it does say it somewhere. It'll say it on the advertising or it'll say it on the actual product itself. If it doesn't say sanding free, then it's a regular base coat and you need to use regular prep. I have to say though, even with sanding free base coats, you can get away with a nice light buff, which is really good just to gently remove that natural shine from the nail plate. But whether it's sanding free or not, I usually just do the same prep, because it's a good habit to have, and that way if you are switching back and forth between, your hard gel or your gel polish, you're still using the same process for your base coat, and consistency is really important to preventing issues in the salon, or even, if you're doing your nails yourself. Quick question. I'm a newbie mobile nail tech, and I put my clients' files into a labeled Ziploc bag only used on them. So why did you say never store used files? I'm just curious. This is a good question, and this is something that a lot of people are not aware of. It would make sense that if you use a file on a client just once, you're like, well, there's plenty of life left in this file or this buffer. Why am I going to toss it in the garbage? Okay, there's a lot of reasons for this. One is storage is actually not allowed in a lot of places that I know of. A lot of US states do not allow storage of nail products with like the client's name on it. So even if it's not a Ziploc bag and it's just one of those like clear plastic boxes you get for like sanitized stuff, a lot of states don't allow it. So you might be violating your state board. If you're doing this at home, I mean, obviously that doesn't apply to you, but if you're working in a salon, you definitely want to make sure that you're even allowed to store stuff. But I still wouldn't do it, even if it's allowed, because there's really no upside to it. Honestly, if you think about how many clients each nail tech has when they get fully booked, I mean, you could literally have a list of 100 people that you work on, and you're going to keep 100 boxes of barely used nail files and buffers just for them in the sheer case that they might come back. I think that if you're thinking about how many new clients you get, how many return clients you get, the turnover, all of that, pretty soon you're going to have a whole library of these boxes, and you're going to be saving stuff for people that, to me, it's like just toss it in the garbage in the first place. Save yourself the storage space, save yourself the expense of Ziplocs or boxes or whatever, and just toss it in the garbage. It's literally like an 85-cent file. Who cares? And if you're charging appropriately on your prices, which we will get into later in my list of videos that I have coming up, you don't need to worry about 85 cents. There's really no upside to storing stuff for people. I think it's really inefficient, and just toss it in the garbage or recycle it if you want to. You can recycle wood and paper files. The other thing I wanted to mention is, if you are, let's say you're at home, okay, and you are going to save your nail file because you only use it on you and you're not storing it for clients, and you're like, I barely use this nail file. Like me, I do that all the time. I like do something on myself and I'm like, I barely used it. I'm going to stick it in the drawer and use it next time. Don't put it in a sealed container. Don't put it in a sealed Ziploc. Don't put it in any type of airtight container, because guess what? All the gross stuff that can grow on nail stuff, like Pseudomonas or other types of bacteria or viruses that just love the nail plate and the cuticle area, they actually thrive in areas where there's no oxygen. So if you put a nail file, even if you barely touched it, there's natural yeast, there's natural bacteria on our skin, and if you put that nail file into a sealed container, it can actually grow like a petri dish. Even though you might not be able to see anything on the nail file, it is actually a huge risk. And I highly recommend that you do not store anything nail related in sealed containers. Don't store your nippers in a sealed container. Don't store anything. It can close, but it needs to have air holes in it, and it needs to be something that can actually release air from inside, especially if you live in a humid environment. I'm in Arizona, so everything dries out like that. But if you're in Florida, you definitely don't want your box of what you thought was clean growing like a little petri dish in there. So make sure that whatever you put it in allows air to circulate through. Great examples are those little plastic nail boxes that have air holes in them. That's a great place to store stuff. You can even label it clean. And I also recommend you have one for dirty stuff as well. The only exception to the Ziploc rule is if you want to use Ziplocs for dirty stuff while you're working, you can absolutely do that. Write dirty on it, throw all your dirty stuff in there, and then you can throw the pouches in your drawer until you're ready to clean them or throw them away. You can absolutely do that. But yeah, to answer your question, I really don't think storing it is efficient. I don't think it saves you any money. And I think also the impact of someone seeing that, hey, at the end of the service, I'm going to throw this in the garbage. I mean, you can definitely use that as part of your marketing tactics for showing how clean of an area you are and how clean of a salon and operator you are. So that's my recommendation for you. Don't put anything in sealed containers because it can harbor and also grow and gross stuff that you do not want anywhere near your nails, okay? Let's see here. What is next? When do I use a file and when do I use a buffer, and what are emery boards for? Okay, so if you guys haven't seen my my nail file video, I recommend you go back and watch it. I went over nail files in very big detail. But when should you use a file and when should you use a buffer? Well, buffers in general are not as gritty as nail files, and they're also really squishy and flexible. So I would only use a nail buffer if I'm trying to smooth a surface or if I'm trying to lightly remove shine or create kind of a textured surface on something. It depends on the buffer, of course, because if you're using a very, very fine buffer, you're going to smooth that surface too much. And with gels, gel doesn't like smooth and it doesn't like shiny, especially when we're talking about adhesion of gel. So a buffer, because it's flexible and it's less gritty, I would say it's for refining a surface, right? It's for smoothing a surface, and it can work for non-sanding base coats where we're just lightly removing the natural shine from the nail, but you do need to use a little bit of a grittier buffer for that. But the flexibility is best for the surface of something. Nail files are, depending on the nail file, like the spongy ones that are thicker, can be used for shaping the free edge, shaping the sidewalls, and also refining the surface of the product. So you get kind of a 3-in-1 effect. It can also prep the nail plate really well, like I've shown in my video with nail prep. So nail files, I think, are much more multi-purpose. I actually never use buffers. That might come as a surprise to some people, and if you're an acrylic artist, that'll definitely come as a surprise to you, because with acrylic, everyone gets used to buffing everything to a smooth finish. But with gel, I find it so easy to file gel, and I also don't want the gel to be perfectly smooth at any given time, because I even need my top coat to adhere to whatever I have underneath if I'm doing hard gel or whatever, that I literally almost never use a buffer. I might use one once in a very blue moon, but buffers are not part of my normal service. I find that just with a really nice, 180, 100 grit nail file, it does everything that I need, from prepping the nail plate, filing the free edge, and also refining any product that I've put on top. I don't use buffers. So that's the difference between the two. And emery boards are like a thin, flexible version of a professional nail file. So you can see this doesn't flex that much. And I'm sorry, I don't have an emery board right here ready for you guys. But an emery board, they're thin and they're usually like a brownish tan color. And emery boards are usually known for working on natural nails. That's what they've been known for a really long time. But again, I just use these. Even if it's a natural nail client, I still like to use a professional nail file because it's a little bit firmer, it's got more surface area, it's usually higher quality as far as the way that the abrasive is attached to the nail file. And so I like to use these. I use almost 180 grit for everything, even natural nails, free edge. If I'm gonna do gel polish, I use 180 grit. And because I use high quality files, 180 is not that gritty. You can also use 220 if you want to for natural nails if 180 freaks you out. But I find that it really comes down to the amount of pressure that you put on the nail file and not so much the grit itself. Okay, hope that helps. If you have a nail or cuticle infection, how do you treat it? Okay, this is a really good question. All right, so I really don't like saying this kind of stuff because I don't want someone to stay at home with an infection and not get it treated. But let's say you accidentally nick your cuticle, and of course it's gonna be a little bit pink, it's gonna be sore, and it's just like any other thing. You cut your hand while you're cutting carrots or whatever. A lot of times just cleaning it with hydrogen peroxide and putting some Neosporin and a Band-Aid on it is gonna do the trick. And I would keep nail products away from that area for a while until the cut is completely healed. I never work on nails that have open wounds. So if you or a client have an open bleeding wound, don't put anything on your finger. Nail products can get into your bloodstream that way, which is not a good thing. And it can also irritate the wound, even if it's not something that has a hefty chemical in it. It can irritate the wound. There's nothing worse than getting rubbing alcohol from cleaning your gel polish in a cut. So I recommend just clean it with hydrogen peroxide, put some Neosporin on it, put a Band-Aid on it, let it heal. And if that seems to do the trick for the next 24 to 48 hours, great. If it heals up, awesome, and you'll be able to tell it scabs over, it doesn't feel sore anymore, and it's not heavily infected. If, however, your wound develops redness that goes anywhere up into your finger, has pus coming out of it, is really, really sore and tender, and just is not a happy camper, go to a doctor. Don't try crazy home remedies. Don't do all this weird stuff that you've seen. Just go to a doctor. Fingers are really, I would say, temperamental. I mean, there are extremities, and extremities have a hard time with circulation, and cuts tend to heal slower than anywhere else on our bodies. So the last thing that you want is some teeny tiny little cut to turn into some huge infection and lead to a finger or toe amputation. So when in doubt, go to a doctor. But if it's something really small, like you accidentally cut yourself with your nail file and you've got a little paper cut, or you absolutely accidentally nicked yourself with your nippers and it's bleeding, hydrogen peroxide, Neosporin, or even Styptic. Styptic is great. The little liquid drops stops the bleeding and also will clean up the wound. You can put that on there as well, but it just burns like crazy. But Styptic is great. So use your common sense. If it looks like it's just a teeny little thing, it's going to heal up great. I say, doctor it with the typical thing you would do anytime you cut yourself. But keep a close eye on it, and definitely go to a doctor if it gets any worse. And if you are someone who has diabetes or any type of disease that really affects your circulation, you really need to be even more careful with stuff. Even if you're a DIYer, diabetes is a really serious thing, and because it affects your circulation, the tiniest little wound can turn into a big issue. So if you have diabetes or any disease that affects your circulation, go to a doctor, okay? I really recommend that, and don't use metal tools. Be really careful about cutting yourself, but I hope that makes sense. All right? Okay. Take a little swig of jasmine tea. What is pterygium? This is a really good question, and I actually fell into this trap when I first started doing nails as well. I used to see the word pterygium used as cuticle. So if you remember from my my cuticle prep video, I showed you guys a diagram of the nail plate and the surrounding skin and what cuticle is. Cuticle is that dried white material that grows out onto the nail plate that we remove with a cuticle pusher, and a lot of people refer to that as pterygium. Pterygium has nothing to do with cuticle as far as like the dry scaly stuff that we need to clean off before we're putting product on. Pterygium is actually an issue where your skin grows into the nail plate. So they literally have nothing to do with one another, and I know that a lot of people are going around saying pterygium. I have even made that mistake in the past. I referred to dried cuticle as pterygium because that's what I was taught when I first started doing nails. But what the real term is, that dried white gross stuff on the nail plate that we want to clean off while we're doing our nail prep, that is cuticle, and it's not pterygium. Pterygium is an actual disorder of the nail plate and the cuticle area. Okay? Next question. I've noticed that different lamps have different wattages, 24 watts, 36 watts, 48 watts, etc. How do we know how long to cure different gels in these different wattages, and what does the wattage mean? How many watts do I need? This is a very good question. So in my nail lamp video, we talked about the different types of bulbs. We talked about the different types of light that's emitted by these bulbs and how that affects our gels that we're curing. Wattage actually refers to, it's the same thing as an incandescent bulb. So wattage typically refers to how much light is being emitted. And oftentimes with LED lamps, it's the number of LEDs that are in the lamp. So typically, LEDs, the little teeny tiny light emitting diodes, are about 1 to 3 watts each. It depends on the manufacturer, but typically they are rated at 1 to 3 watts each little teeny LED, okay? So if you have 18 of those, you're gonna have, so if each one is 2 watts and you have 18 of those, you're gonna have a 36 watt LED lamp, right? So if you remember, I'll just grab my lamp real quick here. Okay, So all of these guys in here, all of my LEDs, if they're each 1 LED, if they're all 1 watt LED, I can count them up and it's gonna be 1 times however many LEDs are in here. If they're 2 watts and I've got 18 in here, that's a 36 watt, or if I have more. And a lot of times it'll say on the box what the wattage of the lamp is. So this one is a 48 watt maximum wattage lamp. And so typically that means how much light gets emitted by the lamp or how powerful the lamp is. If you have anything less than a 36 watt lamp, I'm going to be honest, you're going to have problems. Now, that doesn't mean that all 36 watt lamps are high quality. It just means that I really recommend to stay away from anything less than 36 watts. Less than 36 watts, it's very difficult to cure anything. A lot of the red carpet manicure lamps or some of the little teeny portable ones, you'll see 9 watts, you'll see 12 watts, and it might be okay with that particular brand, especially if it's more of like a nail polish, gel polish type of brand that's made for at home. Yeah, you might have a 9 watt, 12 watt lamp that comes with it because that's all it needs. But a lot of times, even in those lamps, those products don't cure that well. And once you put it into a 36 watt or 48 watt lamp, it cures like a dream. And it's because of the formula of the gel, it doesn't need as much ultraviolet light to cure. But once you get into things like builder gel or high pigmented color gels, or you get into like really, really true gel products that don't have those nail polish like ingredients, you're gonna have issues curing with stuff that's less than 36 watts, okay? So how many watts do you need? I would say at least 36 watts. And usually the wattage is a combination of how powerful the LEDs are and how many LEDs are inside the lamp. If you're using a CFL lamp, typically each CFL bulb is 9 watts. So if you have, you know, I don't know how many, I forget how many are in a typical one. I think there's 4. So in a typical traditional ultraviolet lamp that uses CFL tube bulbs, usually I think there's 4. There's 1 on the side, 2 on the top, and 1 on the other side, and they're all 9 watts. So that's how you get a 36 watt ultraviolet lamp. But again, a 36 watt ultraviolet lamp that uses CFL and a 36 watt ultraviolet lamp that uses LED, they're not going to have the same curing power necessarily, and they're not going to cure the gel the same way. So wattage is an important indicator of power, but it's not necessarily the end-all be-all to whether or not that lamp is going to be able to cure all of your products. I know that's confusing, but I mean, don't just rely on wattage alone. And that's also why I recommend that, you know, even though you can buy a generic lamp, I mean, hell, you could probably buy a 100 watt lamp off of AliExpress and say, this is going to cure all my stuff. I don't want to spend more than 80 bucks on a lamp. I'm just going to buy some no-name brand on AliExpress that says it's 100 watts and has whatever on it. Fine. But you also have to take accountability for that, which means if it doesn't cure your gels, it's not the problem of the manufacturer who made those gels that they're not curing, because you're outside of the purview of what they're willing to back. And I think that that is totally understandable, because how the heck would they be able to test their gels with every single lamp that's on the market? So if you want to dabble with lamps, absolutely dabble with lamps. You can test your gels, and I'll show you guys in a future video how to test your gels. I'm actually going to go over that next. You can absolutely test whether or not they're curing, and that's what manufacturers do, is they pick the lamp they want to use and they test to make sure that that lamp cures their gels properly through something called a tensile test. But you also want to take on the accountability if you are going to dabble and just say, hey, I know that I am buying a lamp that my manufacturer that makes my gels does not support. So I am taking on the responsibility of, if anything goes wrong with these products, it is my fault, not the manufacturer of the gel, okay? And that's just something that you have to do. I have had a lot of success with using different lamps with different gels, but I find that it also takes a lot of wherewithal to be able to do that. So I'm going to teach you guys as much as I can about how to be successful with different lamps and different brands, because if you're like me, you probably own lots of different brands of gel and you don't want to have to own a lamp for every single system. So we want to be able to buy 1 high-powered lamp or even 2 for our nail table and just be able to know that that lamp is going to cure everything that we own. I totally get it. But there is inherent risk with that, and you just have to be willing to take the accountability for that, okay? So we'll address that in a future video. So I hope that helps with what wattage means, what's the difference, and how many watts you need. that's usually the scenario. 36 watts is a great number. And also I got asked, is there such thing of using a lamp wattage that is too high? This is also a great question. So something that I've seen in our industry is the lamps just continue to get more powerful. They cure faster. I mean, I have some lamps that cure their gels in 5 to 10 seconds, which is just crazy, especially considering that when gels first started, we had to cure them for 3 to 5 minutes. Some of them were 5 minutes, which is crazy to sit there for 5 minutes waiting for the product to cure. So we are very spoiled these days. Things cure very, very quickly. And wattage continues to go up, power continues to go up. So is there such a thing as too high of wattage? Well, one issue is a lot of brands that you use may not be formulated to be cured that quickly or that thoroughly. So if you over cure a product, it can lead to things like brittleness, yellowing. It can also cause overexposure of the pigment inside the gel, and it might actually cause kind of pinks to turn beige or red to turn pink. So yes, you can have some adverse side effects with over curing. Have I experienced that myself? No, not really. I mean, I've even had stuff where I cured it too long. The worst situation is usually in no cleanse top coats because of the amount of photoinitiators they have. They tend to get really yellow. So usually the worst thing I've ever had as far as, consequences to over curing something is that the top coat gets yellow. So I put it over something and I'm like, oh, dang it, my white nails don't look super white anymore. They look kind of tinged. And it's because of those photoinitiators. They get overactivated, and even though they do fade over time, sometimes it just stays and it affects the color. So that's like one of the worst situations I've had. I've never really seen product breakdown or brittleness. I know that a lot of manufacturers are concerned about that, but I've never seen it. I've never experienced it, even with all the gels that I've used. I would say the worst consequence of curing things faster and more power is that a gel that wasn't hot at all, that didn't have a very severe exothermic reaction, which means heat is released during the curing process, and that's that burning sensation that you might feel. That exothermic reaction can actually be made worse by faster curing times or more powerful light exposure. So maybe a gel that cured a little bit slower and the exothermic reaction was much more gradual. If you put it into some crazy 100 watt lamp, it might be like zing, and you might feel really, really painful exothermic reaction sensation. So I would say maybe the yellowing and the increase in exothermic reaction are probably the two, things you need to watch out for when using a really high wattage lamp. But I just don't know how much more we can do in this industry. I mean, I feel like lamps keep getting improved, keep coming out new. And I feel like we're going to get to a point where it's just like, come on, like how much faster do we need it to cure? I can only paint a nail in 30 seconds. I don't know about you, but I think the fastest I can apply product on one finger is maybe 20 to 30 seconds. So any faster curing time than that really doesn't help me because I can't work faster than that. So I think we're going to get to a point where it just makes sense to like stop advancing the technology, but we'll see. That's just my 2 cents. And then let's see, last but not least, will my LED desk lamp cure my gels? I just got a new slimline and I'm concerned it's going to cure my product. Okay, so remember from my lamp video, LED does not mean that it emits ultraviolet light. LED is just a type of light bulb. It's a light emitting diode, just like CFL is compact fluorescent, okay? So just because something is emitted by the light that comes from a lamp is emitted by an LED doesn't mean that that light is ultraviolet light. Remember, gels need ultraviolet light to cure, and there can be LEDs that emit infrared light, there can be blue light, green light, orange light, yellow light, white light, black light. So remember that ultraviolet light is what's needed to cure gels, and so it doesn't mean that your lamp is going to cure them. So unless you have a UV lamp, like one of those, oh, you're not getting enough vitamin D type of indoor lamps, it's not going to cure your gels. The one thing I will say is halogen bulbs do emit some ultraviolet light that will cure gels. So if you are in a trade show arena and those giant halogen bulbs that are up there, yeah, they can cure your gel if you leave them out for an extended period of time. Incandescent bulbs also can sometimes put a film or harden the surface of your gel. It's a very, very slow process, but I have had that happen before where I left a jar sitting out and I could tell there was just like a thin layer on top that had started to cure, and I just peeled it off and threw it in the garbage. But yeah, it doesn't mean, just because something's LED doesn't mean it's going to cure your gels. It has to emit ultraviolet light. That's very important to remember, that LED is just a type of light bulb. Well, it's not really a light bulb, it's a diode, but it's, in layman's terms, it's a type of light bulb, and it has to emit ultraviolet light in order to cure your gels, okay? So any of those slimline, daylight, table lamps, or, I mean, I use a lot of LED lamps. I actually use all kinds of bulbs here in the studio, and I find that, you know, as long as I'm working and I keep my stuff capped, nothing really happens. It's usually just if you leave stuff out for extended period of times. And of course, if you're working in front of a window that doesn't have ultraviolet protection on it, the sun will also cure your gels. So don't do your nails in front of a sunny window, and don't leave your stuff in front of a sunny window. Be aware of where the light is coming from. And I always put the lid back on when I'm not working, because you don't want dust in there and you don't want it to cure. So I hope that helps. Okay? All right, guys. This has been an awesome Q&A session. I hope this helped to answer some of the questions that you guys left me over the last 8 weeks. I've got lots more awesome videos coming for you guys. We're going to start getting into all kinds of stuff like e-filing, sanitization, safety while working, builder gels, artificial enhancements, and as we move through this, we're going to also continue to talk about some of these things that we just covered, because everything builds on itself as we move forward. So you're going to hear me review things as we go forward, but I want to make sure that you guys always feel comfortable and confident asking me questions. Honestly, I love getting asked questions, even if they're really, really basic. I think it's really important to put it out there. And if you have a question, it's more likely that someone else does too. Plus, it also helps keep me on track and make sure that I am actually including as much information as possible and that I'm clearly explaining everything. So it really helps me when you guys ask me questions, okay? Thanks for tuning in, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.